Never tell everything you know. Never show everything you feel. And never reveal the full depth of your power until the moment comes to strike. Power, my friend, is not always about brute strength, wealth, or status. It is about the trait that makes you appear untouchable, the quality that places you in a category others cannot compete with. This is the unfair advantage, the silent force Machiavelli understood so well. It is not about being liked, it is about being necessary, about being feared just enough to be respected, and respected just enough to be followed. Think about this. Most people move through life, trying to balance on the fragile rope of approval. They want acceptance. They want to be validated. They want the applause of the crowd. But the crowd's applause is worth nothing if you don't hold the power that makes the crowd need you. Machiavelli warned against this weakness. The unfair advantage is not given, it is crafted. It is a mix of patience, strategy, and the ability to control your emotions when others are slaves to theirs. The majority are impulsive, easily provoked, easily manipulated, because they lack discipline over themselves. But the one who can master his own face, his own voice, his own timing, becomes the master of others. Imagine two men in the same room. One cannot sit still, his emotions betray him, his tone rises and falls with his insecurity. The other is calm, steady, deliberate in his movements. His silence says more than words ever could. Which of these men has the advantage? It is the one who knows that composure is not weakness, but strategy. That self-restraint creates mystery, and mystery creates power. Machiavelli's world was ruthless, full of betrayals, shifting loyalties, hidden daggers behind false smiles. And yet, even in that world, there were men who rose above others not because they were the richest or the most charming, but because they cultivated the one trait that gave them leverage: strategic detachment. They knew when to withhold, when to speak, when to disappear, and when to make their presence so loud that it silenced every other voice in the room. Let me tell you something dangerous. Fairness is an illusion. In the raw structure of power, no one truly plays fair. To expect fairness from men is to prepare yourself for defeat. The trait that becomes your unfair advantage is your willingness to do what others will not. Your willingness to think 3 moves ahead when others are still distracted by the present moment. The one who can detach himself from emotion, who can step outside the immediate chaos and see the whole board, becomes untouchable. Machiavelli believed men are driven by 2 main forces: fear and love. But he also believed that when forced to choose, it is safer to be feared than loved. Why? Because love is fragile, dependent on emotion, easily broken. Fear, however, anchors obedience. When people fear the loss of your favor, fear the weight of your silence, fear the consequences of crossing you, they are bound to you by a chain stronger than affection. The unfair advantage is your understanding of this principle, and your ability to use it without hesitation. But here lies the deeper truth. It is not about cruelty. It is not about random brutality. It is about the cold ability to separate personal feeling from strategic action. The ruler who tries to be merciful at all costs is eventually destroyed by those who exploit his kindness. The man who tries to please everyone is slowly consumed by those who sense his weakness. The unfair advantage is that you do not bend where others bend. You do not break where others break. You know the limits of mercy, and you know the moment when mercy must be withdrawn. Look at your own life. Where are you being too predictable? Where are you revealing too much of yourself, making it easy for others to calculate your moves? Machiavelli warned against transparency. The moment people can read you like a book, they will begin writing the ending for you. But when you become unreadable, when your silence becomes heavier than your words, when your restraint confuses those who expect reaction, you create a fog of power that others cannot penetrate. That fog is your unfair advantage. The masses believe strength comes from constant display, from shouting, from flexing authority. But true authority requires no display. The lion does not need to roar constantly for the jungle to know he is king. The unfair advantage is when your presence alone alters the atmosphere of the room. It is when people adjust their tone, their words, even their posture in your presence without you demanding it. That is influence. And influence is more powerful than force. The path to this level of power is not easy. It demands self-discipline sharper than a blade. It demands patience when others are impulsive, foresight when others are blind, and detachment when others are drowning in emotion. Most people cannot do this. They are too addicted to attention, too desperate for validation, too afraid of silence. And that is why most people will never rise above mediocrity. You, however, can. If you cultivate this one trait, you separate yourself from the majority. You begin to walk in the world differently. Opportunities start to bend in your favor because people sense something unshakable in you. Even your enemies begin to tread carefully, unsure of your limits, hesitant to provoke a storm they cannot predict. That hesitation is worth more than applause. That hesitation is your shield and your sword. This is the Machiavellian truth. Life is not about equality of chance, but superiority of preparation. The one who prepares in silence, who calculates in the shadows, who knows how to strike at the perfect moment, this is the one who wins. Your unfair advantage will always be your ability to detach from weakness, from emotion, from the illusions that trap ordinary minds. So remember this: never reveal your entire hand. Never react when reaction is expected. Never show your enemy the depth of your fear or the height of your ambition. Move quietly, strategically, patiently. Make your presence felt, not explained. Let others waste their energy, their time, their emotions. You conserve yours. And when the moment comes, you strike once, decisively, leaving no room for recovery. That is the unfair advantage Machiavelli understood. That is the path to power that few dare to walk, but the one that leads to mastery over others. Power is not taken by chance. It is seized by design. These words echo like a blade against stone, sharp and unyielding. The unfair advantage, my friend, is not a gift of nature, nor an accident of birth. It is a discipline. It is the willingness to shape yourself into a weapon when others remain dull, to cultivate your mind while others drown in pleasure, to sharpen your silence while others waste themselves in noise. That is why the trait I am speaking of, the one Machiavelli hinted at in every page, is not something everyone can possess. It requires a decision most are too weak to make. Most men are trapped in a prison of predictability. Their desires are visible, their fears are written on their faces, their ambitions are spoken too loudly for anyone to miss. But the one who understands restraint, the one who conceals his true intentions behind a mask, the one who can smile at an enemy while planning his downfall, that one rises above the rest. That one gains the unfair advantage, because while others live openly, he lives strategically. Think of the chessboard. Pawns move fast, openly, predictably. The king moves slowly, carefully. But every move alters the game. Which piece survives longer? Which piece holds the true weight of power? The king is not loved by every piece. He is necessary to every piece. Machiavelli reminds us that it is better to be necessary than to be adored, because necessity binds loyalty tighter than love. The unfair advantage is when you make yourself necessary when people realize they cannot advance, cannot survive, cannot move without you. And how do you do this? By cultivating the one trait most lack: the ability to detach your heart from your strategy. When others are begging for acceptance, you stand unmoved. When others rush for immediate gain, You wait patiently for the decisive moment. When others rage with anger, you stay calm, because anger reveals weakness, while composure reveals power. People underestimate calmness. They confuse silence with passivity. But silence is a shield, a mirror, a weapon. When you master it, you hold the leash of those who cannot stand it. Machiavelli lived in a world where betrayal was as common as breath. Alliances shifted overnight, promises dissolved with the sunrise, enemies wore the mask of friends. In such a world, only those who had the unfair advantage survived. And the unfair advantage was never brute force alone. It was cunning. It was foresight. It was the ruthless clarity to see men as they are, not as they pretend to be. That trait, the ability to pierce illusion, is what sets you above the herd. Do not be deceived. Fairness is for children, not for rulers. In the jungle of men, no one rises by fairness. They rise by preparation, by calculation, by the quiet ability to act in ways others are unwilling to. Most people will never choose this path. They are too attached to comfort, too afraid of rejection, too desperate for applause. And so, they remain average. They remain pawns. But you, if you are willing to cultivate this discipline, you become more than a player in the game. You become the one who designs it. Because once you taste this advantage, there is no going back to ordinary life. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot unlearn what you have learned. You will begin to notice how predictable people are, how easily they give themselves away, how desperate they are for recognition, how they beg for mercy in silence while pretending strength in words. And you will realize that the true battlefield is not the world outside, but the mind of men. If you can master that battlefield, if you can step into their weakness without ever exposing your own, you hold dominion. Others will think you are lucky, that fate favors you, but fate has nothing to do with it. It is design, it is patience, it is your refusal to live like the rest of them. They will call you cold because they cannot comprehend restraint. They will call you ruthless because they cannot understand clarity. They will call you dangerous because they cannot control you. Let them speak. Their words are noise, and noise cannot wound a man who has mastered silence. You will stand above them, untouched by their opinions, unshaken by their judgments. That is the unfair advantage. To be independent of the crowd, yet to command it at will. And make no mistake, the crowd must be commanded. They cannot guide themselves. They require structure, leadership, and anchor. If you do not step into that role, someone weaker will, and weakness at the top destroys everyone below. Better a ruler with sharp edges than a ruler with no spine. Better a hand of iron than a hand of air. Machiavelli knew this truth and carved it into history. The world does not reward purity, it rewards strategy. The kingdom is not won by chance, but by the man who understands that necessity is stronger than morality. So let others pray for fairness. Let them waste years waiting for recognition, for kindness, for an equal chance. You will not wait. You will build. You will observe. You will strike when the moment is ripe. And when you do, they will call it unfair, but that is only because they never prepared themselves. That is because they never had the discipline to shape their own silence into a blade. Do you see the danger of this trait? Once you cultivate it, you will never be like others again. You will no longer beg for fairness, because you will know fairness is an illusion. You will no longer crave approval, because you will understand approval is temporary. You will no longer chase validation, because you will know power is built in silence. This trait makes you both feared and respected, desired and envied. It makes you untouchable. That is why it is unfair. That is why it gives you advantage. This, my friend, is where the difference lies. Ordinary men live in reaction. The extraordinary man lives in design. Ordinary men wait to be chosen. The extraordinary man makes himself essential. Ordinary men chase applause. The extraordinary man commands fear and respect in equal measure. That is the dividing line. That is the secret Machiavelli whispered to those who had the courage to listen. And if you have listened tonight, truly listened, then you will never be the same.